Hello, this is Sarah V, and today I wanted to talk about some of the variations that I've made for Simplicity 8736, which I made recently on this channel. I talked a little bit about these variations as I sewed last time, but I think one of them did in fact get cut off because I accidentally deleted it when I was editing. I am not going to be putting these on because that's a lot of back buttons. And I think it'll be easier to talk about them if I use her over here. I think I named her Marjorie at one point, but don't quote me on that. On the inside, it was before I knew a whole lot about seam allowance, so I just would slap some seams together, have some zigzag stitching, finishing the seams. Like, look how small this seam is. I thought that was acceptable, even though that's not the seam allowance at all. Anyway, I also didn't know what understitching was. I think this was in my first 5 projects I made sewing. It was the first one where I really actually tried to follow the pattern instructions. So the tucks, I didn't know what they meant. So I folded it over and sewed through from the outside. And because of the blousing from the tucks, it was very gapey in the front. So I always had to wear something quite high-waisted or with a sweater. Also, these gear buttons were an atrocious choice. Has hand-worked buttonholes, which are barely big enough to put these through, and way too close to the edge. I think her hips are too wide and her belly, because I do have this padded out to be more like my shape. I think that's as far as we're gonna get. Maybe. And I made this when I was 17. I don't know why I needed a button all the way 1 inch from the bottom. So it is quite cute, and I do have, I think, maybe 1.25 yards of this left. It's also before I was very good at making bows, but I have it tacked on, and then I have a little snap. But I think it is still quite cute. It's just that I didn't know all the things that I should be doing, and I didn't know how to read the pattern instructions very well. And then it's just straight in the back, because I put the buttons in the front. And as far as my collar, could not do a very good job getting the edge to be lined up. So the bottom of the collar is showing from underneath. This next one I was super excited to make, and I only had like a 7/8 of a yard remnant. So I really had to squeeze it out. Now I have a proper seam allowance, although I did pink it. This was in my pinking phase. And it's too short, so I have this band of white at the bottom. This was also a plissé fabric, which is just a it's a fake seersucker, where that kind of wrinkled look, instead of the strings being pulled to achieve that look, I think it's done chemically, and you can iron it out. So all of that is ironed out. I also ran out of room for the placket, so there's white there, and the facing is white, and the collar is white, and the sleeves are white. But I thought it would be really cool to add some piping along the edges. I think this was right after I made my dirndl, maybe. I was like, ooh, piping. So I made some piping out of some scrap fabric. And that bow is not closed very good. But it is what it is. There's also no interfacing in anything. It took me a long time before I realized that I should maybe do interfacing. Same with understitching. But I also did the piping in the back because I had that seam, so might as well. And it was some scrap fabric from a wrap skirt I made. This one I at least knew how to follow the pattern instructions. And I knew how to use seam allowance. But my hand stitching still wasn't fantastic. But it's pretty cute. It was wearable. And the buttons in the back are some green buttons that I think I found in one of my button jars from my great-grandmother. This next shirt I was really proud of, although I could always feel it in my armpits. And this one and those last two were all quite short, and the tucks weren't in the right place, and it was always coming untucked if I wore it with stuff, even high-waisted stuff. But this was the first thing I sandwiched lace on. I was still in my pinking phase. I think I made this one right before I went to college. But this was the best one out of the three I made previously. And it's also the only one that I made with View A. And these are all made from quilting cotton. The only thing I really didn't like about this one is that the lace would kind of like want to flip down. But that's minor. But I really liked this one. And I should probably remake her in a size that fits, so then I can continue to wear cute little lacy shirts. And this one I just did some white buttons down the back. And this was still in my hand-worked buttonhole era because I was too scared to do it on my sewing machine. Even though if you do it on the sewing machine, it's much easier and it takes much less time. The scariest part of doing that is opening the buttons though, the buttonholes. Because I didn't learn how to make buttonholes on that machine until my second year of college. And I was like, oh, I can put buttonholes on everything. I think then I made like 3 shirts. The last one is a very, very recent one. I didn't even stitch the facing down this time because it doesn't really need to be stitched down. The last ones I just whip stitched it down on the inside. This one has the nicest looking bow because I have bow skills now. Because I had to look up how to tie a bow for the dress I wore to my college graduation. And the facing is so little that I had to hand stitch the label on. But this one has the best drape because it's not just quilting cotton. And this one's the only one that's long enough too. So that's pretty cool. But other than that, I don't have much to say about that. If you'd like to hear more about it, I have another video I'll just put up yonder. But yeah, This is everything I've made with that simplicity pattern. That's all for today. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like, and if you'd like to see more sewing content, please subscribe. If you would like to see what I'm up to day to day, I try to post on Instagram and my story at least daily, but it kind of gets away from me. And that is at Sarah V Sews Vintage. Thank you again for watching, and see you next time.